We're trained to emotionally trust publishers or agents. But if you reorient and you start from the premise that the machine will never reward you, it will only reward itself, you stop emotionally trusting these entities and you start looking for structural trust. How do I create a structure that I can trust, that I can operate in? You do that outside the system, and that's where the resistance part comes in.
Hello, you writing rebels. I'm Kristen McTiernan, and today we're going to be doing something sort of different with the interview, but not super different. Today's guest is Kit Perez, who, yes, is an author, just like everyone else I talk to on this channel. However, what is interesting about Kit Perez is that she is not a fiction author. She's not a self-help author. She's not a copywriting guru. What Kit's expertise is the art and science of resistance. Now, I have made no secret of the way I feel about things and how things ought to be, but we are not a political channel, and that does not change today. We're not going to be talking about overthrowing municipalities or any such nonsense like that. But as independent authors and creators, we are up against the system. Whether or not we are ideologically aligned with that system is not aligned with us, just by virtue of the fact that we are independent. The system does not like independence. Ergo, if you want to create your own thing, if you want to cultivate your own audience, then that comes with it a certain level of resistance, something that for the general public and certainly for writers, creatives, sensitive folk, it doesn't necessarily come naturally to us, which is why I am so delighted that when I put out my open call for interviews, Kit was one person who responded. And she's going to help us break down what exactly it means to build your own signal, as I advise you in my tagline. What does it mean to go up against the system? What does it mean to build your own audience? And what does it mean when people don't like you very much for doing that? I enjoyed having this conversation, and I strongly suspect you're going to like it too. Take it away, Kit. So I saw you are the author of 2 books, or are there more?
I'm working on the third. The first one I co-wrote with Claire Wolf, who, if you're in a resistance or even an anarchist space, that was the draw because I'm not an anarchist and she is. So we decided to write about the Venn diagram of where we do overlap, even though we're completely opposed on certain political issues. It didn't matter because what we were talking about isn't party-based. It's not position-based. It's just truth-based. So we wrote that one together, and then I went on my own as I start, like I say, synthesizing some of these things, understanding shame and validation and all of that, and putting that into the mix.
Now, I noted, and I think I got the right LinkedIn page, but I was looking, and you're working largely in counseling now, trauma-based effects. So how did that come around? Because I get it, though, because people who are involved in resistance, usually there's some kind of a trauma or just a bad thing that happens to get them started on that path. So tell us about the kind of work that you're doing and how you got there based on your previous work in resistance.
It's funny, I explain it to my clients sometimes that when you have trauma, like if you were to think about, because I've lost a child, I've been through assault, just certain things out there in my past that it makes perfect sense why I would want to be a profiler. I want to see those people coming because I don't ever want to be hurt again. I also want to synthesize out into helping other people because that satisfies my protective instinct. But as I heal, now I'm being able to take those tools that I've learned and also say, hey, I'm coming at this from a different place. I still have these skills, and I write about this. Now I'm not compulsive about them. They're not something that I have to do to feel safe. They're something that I'm disciplined about and I can choose to use for the good of others because they're not the trauma that I've experienced or what have you. It's not the cover of my book. It's just a chapter. There's a whole story there. And it's funny, as you heal, you keep the tools, but now you're more disciplined about it. And so that's how the journey has morphed over time.
Awesome. I love that. And that serves as a really good segue because in my work, I work with authors, and most of them have become disillusioned with the system, usually referring to the publishing system, but sometimes it translates
Mhm.
to the larger political system. And some of them, I've got one or two on Substack specifically, where they were traditionally published, but very briefly, and the fallout from that, and then trying to move into indie and then finding not at all like-minded people in the indie space, that
Right.
seems to have left like genuine trauma. As I watch their behavior, it looks like they're just wrecked and they don't know what else to do. They don't know who they are. And now that kind of that dismissal that they experienced both from trad and indie pub spaces serves as their identity instead of just, like you said, being the cover of their book. It's also the interior. You talk about resistance being valid regardless of who's in power. So this isn't vote for my guy. This is
Right.
resist the power structures full stop. So for authors feeling shut out by traditional publishing and feeling the need to resist against that and find alternative paths, what is the difference between productive resistance, like actually doing something, and just complaining online, which is sometimes what us professional yappers get accused of?
First off, you have to put it in the right space, right? Because writers and creators, we are the resistance in that space because you have your big five, you have your DRM, you have your all of these things. They are the system, right? So, in a sense, even though I write for quote unquote political resistance, the same principles apply. And that's true whether you're in a corporate environment and you're trying to fight the system or you're in political activism or whatever. Because and that's why I was able to, with Claire, for instance, write a book from completely different sides of the political spectrum because the principles live outside of that. And for instance, talking about Amazon, a lot of people say, oh, Amazon's evil, blah, blah. It's not evil, it's predictable. It goes according to a set of rules. And I published those first two books on KDP, right? Like a lot of people. And we thought at the time that was the only way to do it because here we are coming with this subversive content. So nobody's going to publish it. And so we put it on Amazon. And Claire comes from decades of readership building and all of this. And so we were able to leverage that, get a lot of pre-orders. And so we got to be this flash in the pan that some authors feel, right? Oh, wow, this really is going to work. But then it doesn't because it ends up just going like this, right? And then you're left disillusioned. And I thought this was supposed to work. Amazon promised me this, promised me that. And so you complain. With the second book, I just did it on my own. Didn't really have time to market. And let's be real, we're not marketers, or at least I'm not. I just want to be left alone to create, right? Don't ask me to blow my horn about it. That didn't even get the flash in the pan. And so I'm coming back and looking at my KDP stats and going, man. And it's really easy, like you say, to envelop that into my identity and go, my work is worthless. Therefore, I am worthless. And that leads to a whole host of mental health issues and whatnot, right? So instead of orienting to the optics, like creators do a lot of time with Amazon, it's got to be numbers. I didn't sell as much or whatever. Reorient to the reality, which you stop expecting the machine to reward you because it's not going to. The machine always rewards itself.
I love that. And I was reading one of your articles on Substack, and you were talking about the performative aspects of fandom, which I think goes really well with not just authors and the fandoms that we create with the characters, but also with the author community itself. And you were talking about how if you're truly resisting, if you're truly out there fomenting change, then performance isn't necessarily your first priority. You're not always out there in front of the camera. You're actually doing the work. Can you talk about that and what that looks like in practice?
So if you want the easy Amazon distribution, for instance, and it speaks to those of us who don't have a following, and so it seems easy to go on there. Okay, they're going to do all the work for me. We love that. We always love it when other people do the work, which kind of plays into the political spectrum, right? We love our rallies. We love our protests. And I'm all about that, right? First Amendment all the way. Also, It needs to move the needle. And the thing is, as we just talked about, getting on KDP does not move the needle for you. All it does is create availability. It doesn't create buzz. It doesn't create necessity or even scarcity, which we know are some of the principles of social influence, right? That's why the pre-order thing gets hyped. You have to create social proof that other people want your stuff, and then they will want it too. But if you build outside the system, now you're not dependent on Amazon's algorithm. You're not dependent on the performance of, I have to get on podcasts. I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to market. I have to. You can just focus on writing. I've been writing on Substack for 4 years, and it's just in, I would say, January of this year that I started being consistent. It used to be where I was just, oh, you know what? I could write about that. And it might be a year before I come back and write. And now I'm writing every single week. I'm doing the research. I'm treating it like a job. And it's less performance. Who can I go talk to? Who can I perform in front of? And it becomes more about, okay, what do I know to be true? What is the reality of the battle space that I'm operating in? And how am I answering the question? So when it comes to that changing from performance to needle moving, you got to stop looking at, oh, I got to fight Amazon. You don't fight Amazon directly because really, that's not good. So what you do is you build the systems with the structural trust that will survive outside of Amazon, Substack, Gumroad, your own website, if that's something that you want to do. So also with that performance thing, you have authors who will complain and then tell you that they just released another book on Amazon. You can't have both, right? You can't simultaneously say, I do not stand for this system. Also, I just totally paid into it. You can't have that. So that is a reorientation problem. People are not reorienting to reality. And this is something that's the underpinning of the entire idea. You have reality, and then you have your hallucination of reality. Once you can parse the two of those things out, you're really going to find options opening up. I'm not stuck complaining about KDP or Amazon or all these pay-to-play places. I can just go do it. And that's empowering.
But so we're talking about, we've got these authors, and for my audience, they're primarily male authors and male aspiring authors, and they want to break free of Amazon's ecosystems. But the ones who have already published so far, they say, look, I ran the numbers. And even if I release wide, where my ebook is available in other places other than Amazon, I'm gonna lose money. So being Amazon exclusive is where the money's at. I hate it, but I have to play, even though I know they're robbing me blind. And then especially with the Audible, the audiobook part of that, you might be getting pennies for
sure.
audiobook that costs you over $1,000 to make. So
Yeah.
what would you advise them in terms of exit strategy, in terms of building alternative networks? What kind of moves should they be looking to make?
First off, I would say you got to own your audience. So Amazon thrives on customers, right? You bought the book, go away. Also, when you want another book, come back and buy another book and then go away. And really what an author's trying to do, regardless of what you're writing, especially if you're writing fiction, right? You want readership. You want people who are buying your universe, as in they're buying into the concept. They're buying into the emotional investment of your characters and the world that you are creating. So you don't want them to buy a book and go away. You want them to stay. You want them to cultivate a relationship with you. A really good example that I could think of is, and I know that there are people who are going to disagree with this, but Stephen King. I like a couple of Stephen King's books. I'm a customer where I will go buy a book. Oh, that one was good. And maybe I'll check out the next book, but probably not, because I'm not really a fan of his style across the board. Dean Koontz, that makes me a reader, because when I see that he's about to release another book, I am marking it down on the calendar. I am going to carve out some time to spend with him and his characters because I'm emotionally invested. Watcher sucked me in as a teenager, and I've been an actual reader ever since. The difference between those two models is the key. And there are some authors who say, I really don't care if they're emotionally invested. I just want their money. That's it. Okay, this is not going to work for you because you're never going to be able to let go because you've got that fist, right? You're never going to be able to let go of the money long enough to build the system that eventually will catch up and surpass. But this is for the rest of the people who do want that. Own your audience. Make sure that you're building readers. Guard your email list. You get that in Substack or ConvertKit or wherever you're housing your community, right? And then because Amazon owns customers, you're trying to own the readers. You want that relationship. Number 2, you control your distribution. We just talked about that. Do the Gumroad because Substack doesn't allow you to just buy an article, right? I don't want to subscribe to $20 a month, but I also understand why Substack does that because they don't want you to build customer bases. They want you to build readers. So they're purposely gatekeeping that. I get why it's frustrating and I get why they do it. So what I've done, because I don't have to live in that system, right? I've taken my paid articles and I put them up on Gumroad as a one-off. $5, here you go. Read the article you wanted to read. And that's a way that you can resist, per se, the system, even though it's not really an adversarial thing. It's okay. I understand that the reality is they're not going to do this. I want to make that option available, so I'm going to do it. And so I just do my own thing, right? The third thing is you have to set the narrative. So stop looking at your Amazon rankings and thinking that determines the worth of your work, because it doesn't. By all means, stop thinking it determines your worth as a human, because it definitely doesn't. Define it by the direct sales, define it by the retention. I have a couple subscribers on Substack that have not only been with me for years, but they followed the evolution of my thought process. So I don't want those people to go away because they've been around since the beginning. They've watched me shift my mindset. They've watched me evolve my character, so to speak. And so I can go to them and get real feedback before I put out a book or a course or whatever. In fact, I've got a couple people beta testing a course for me right now in Notion. My thoughts, is this going to work? And I can trust their input. Same thing with a fiction writer. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this with this character. What do you guys think? Instead of, I'm up here, the people with the money are down here, and they need to just be throwing the money up at me. No, make it collaborative. Reach into their life. Have them reach into yours. And I'm not saying you got to barbecue, right? But at least be open to the idea that these people who have been on this journey with you, they have valid input. And if you are healing your trauma and your attachment and whatever else you got going on, you're not going to see that as an attack on your values. You're going to see that as, hey, they've invested enough to care. And how much fun is it to read a book where the author maybe did ask for feedback and you gave it, and now you see that feedback in the book and you're like, ooh, I have ownership here. This is also my book. Not from an authorship standpoint, but from that emotional investment.
So, assuming an author gets to where they've successfully built a small parallel economy or kind of culture, what happens? Because we always see this happens where an indie boy does good, but then he sells out, or whatever the movement is gets co-opted by the dominant system. Amazon says, hey, I want to buy that. Or Netflix says, you know what, I want to get that movie rights. And then we're going to swap out all the characters into your story. And you're going to do it because of the money. So what does successful cultural resistance actually look like when it comes to maintaining that independent movement, that parallel economy, that system that you create on the side?
I think first you have to determine, how do you define sellout? Because I promise you, if you ask 50 people, you'll get 49 different answers. And there'll be that Venn diagram, right? There's going to be some overlap. I think we can all agree, and you'll hear that phrase. We can all agree that this. Can we, though? Is that actually true? And I don't personally like when someone says, oh, they're a sellout because now somebody's making a movie about their book. Okay, so they're supposed to do what exactly? Turn down the money? This is going to sound controversial. That to me is rooted in envy. It's this fairness mirage that the world's not fair. No, the world's not fair. And we shouldn't be trying to make it that. Because when you're trying to get fairness, you're ultimately trying to get more power because your set of fairness is different than my set. So in order for me to enact fairness, I have to have power over you so that you cannot enact your utopia and instead I can enact mine, right? So little side journey there. But to bring it back to center, if you get a movie made about your book and I'm sitting over here grousing about it because you didn't do it the way that I think you should have, how does that work? How do I have the right to say that? And maybe you changed all the characters and now I'm mad about that. Okay. But why? Because I had ownership, because I was invested in those characters and now you've changed them. I guess that leads to a bigger debate about what rights do we have as readers to dictate how an author goes about the business end of their work. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Because I know the comic book community in particular, or the fan fiction community, they have something called headcanon, where fans who read it, and maybe they write fan fiction, but they decide all on their own, this is who the character is. And even when the author themselves says, no, that's not right, they feel
Right.
entitled to shush the authors. No, yes, they did, because I have said it, because I am the reader and I know. So there is,
Right.
it always has been that kind of who owns these characters once you release this creative work.
And I would argue that the author still owns them. And I would argue that if you want to do something with them that helps you pay your bills or enjoy a higher quality of life, then do that. If that means that you've decided to plug back into the matrix, I don't feel comfortable passing judgment on someone's actions in that sense because they have autonomy. They have the liberty to make those choices for themselves. I don't have to like them. I might come back and say, I disapprove of this action so much that I'm never going to buy their book again. J.K. Rowling, perfect example. There's lots of people that will never buy her book again because of her political leanings or what have you. And that's their right. We're always allowed to respond to people in the way that we think we can. But for me to say J.K. Rowling is a horrible human being because of her belief system, now we're getting into, or maybe more to the point, Harry Potter is a horrible character, or I think Harry is this person, like you say, you get into the headcanon, you get, this character makes me feel seen, and therefore this character must be exactly like me. That's unhealthy. I'm almost speechless as to how to even respond to that because we identify in a certain way with characters, but to have that enmeshment almost makes it something different. Where now I'm saying, Nora in that book is this kind of person, and I don't think that he wrote it right. She would have responded like this instead of like that. No, the words are on the page. Like, just read it.
I think a good parallel to that would be Alan Moore, the graphic novel artist who did V for Vendetta, among other works. But famously, he hated the movie adaptation and refused any royalties from it. But the important part is he said, I want my share to go to my co-creator, so the artist. They wanted the money because they needed it. And he wasn't going to stand in the way of them getting paid for this movie adaptation that he hated. He said, look, take all of my earnings and distribute it to my co-creators, which I thought, he gets called a dick a lot, and he is, to be fair. But the fact that he would respect the need for his co-creators to make that choice for themselves, I thought was A-okay behavior in my book.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent way to do it because what has he done now? He has honored his own autonomy. He made a choice. He honored his own liberty to make money if he chose, but he chose not to. So then he takes the money and spreads it to his artists. So, like you say, he's honoring everybody's autonomy. He's allowing the movie to be made for those who want it. And yet he's holding true to his standards as well. So if you're going to walk that tightrope, I think that's how you do it. You can still put it out there. Does he need the money from the movie? Probably not. I don't know. But that's his choice to make. That's not my choice to make as a reader or watcher or consumer of whatever the product is.
Definitely. And we do have that toss up. Even just because you're in the indie community doesn't mean you think one way. So some people in the indie community, they're like, no, I follow Louis Rossman and I'm going to own all of my digital products and I'm not going to have this thing where I'm leasing and you call it buying. I'm going to make sure I'm not connected to the internet and all of my devices. They're way over here and they don't want to participate in the system at all. But then there are some who are like, I think the existing system as a system is good. I'm just mad at the ideological takeover and I want to take it back. So for those people who, instead of building their own thing over here, rather they want to take on the industry gatekeepers and resist while infiltrating. What might that look like? Like, how long would that take? Is it even possible?
A hot mess?
Yeah.
I applaud anybody who's willing to bring back that Matrix idea, that moment when I just watched it again for the 50 millionth time, right? So I'm all excited. But that moment when Neo turns around for the first time and he's not running from the agent and he turns around and says, no, actually, we're going to do this right here. That moment, say what you will about the movie or its connotations or whatever, but that moment is really important. And so what you're talking about, when somebody essentially turns around and faces the system and says, nope, we're going to do this and I'm going to burrow in and change you from the outside or from the inside, I don't think it will work. That being said, I absolutely defend anyone's right to do it. I defend their choices, and you'd have to have a lot of people to do it, not necessarily outnumbering it, because you're never going to outnumber it. You're never going to outmoney it. There's an entrenchment that happens. But I think maybe you can control your little tiny piece of it, maybe, where you can say, okay, I can't fix the system. What does that even mean? But I can, maybe I create a publishing company where I'm in the system, but my little domain is controlled by me and I can help certain other indie authors, or I can niche type things. I don't know entirely how that looks. I'm not really a fan of trying to fix things from the inside out. Typically, infiltration isn't done to fix, it's done to destroy. So if you're going to infiltrate the publishing industry, trash it, tear it down. But that, I think, would be a whole other podcast, how you do.
Oh, yes. We might have to put that over on tour. Alrighty. So the next one, this goes more to your current career in helping people with trauma. Now, I first got big, and I don't know why, but it was among memoirists specifically. And the common theme that I found among memoirists is that many of them were writing a memoir because they had experienced some trauma, either as a child or usually adolescence or early adulthood, and they wanted to write a memoir about it. But one thing I noticed that kept happening to my clients and then to viewers and commenters on my videos about memoirs specifically is that they kept falling victim to scams. They seemed to be the scam targets, people who very much wanted to be liked. So there's this whole network, and we call them shovel sellers. Don't sell the gold, sell the shovels, of people who are looking to extract value specifically from writers. And a lot of times I have found that writers who have that wound, that untreated trauma where they're seeking that validation, they're especially open to that and falling for it and losing a lot of money and then being even more traumatized from it. So what would you say are the red flags of someone giving publishing advice, or to watch out for, that a traumatized person might notice, okay, this person is trying to exploit you. They're not trying to help you.
Okay. First of all, don't take publishing advice from someone like me. because I know nothing about publishing. So that kind of is the first thing. I want your credentials. What have you published? I should be able to go somewhere and look it up. I should be able to walk down to the library and get a copy or what have you. So if you're just coming to me out of the ether, oh, I'm an award-winning publisher, what have you. Okay, let's see the list, right? Back it up. Secondly, the number one thing that a writer can do to protect themselves against scams or anything of that type is to heal their stuff. And the reason for that is, let's take, for instance, when you're talking about wanting to be liked, that can get into people pleasing. And I had an article about that on Substack, and I caught some flack. People don't put comments on my stuff as a rule because think of the arena in which I write in, right? Nobody wants John Smith out there in front of God and everyone. But I get the emails or I get the DMs and whatnot. And I basically made the argument that people pleasing at its core is covert narcissism of a fashion. Because if I'm a people pleaser, I am compulsive about controlling what you think of me. And as a creator, I think we all have a little of that. Maybe not, it's not a pathological, we're not diagnosing people, but there's a behavior pattern where obviously I want your viewers to like me. That's why I combed my hair this morning, right? I want you to like me. That's why I took notes beforehand so I didn't come on here and look like an idiot. We all engage in these behaviors that we want to be liked. And that's okay. But if it gets to that pathological thing where, like we talked about earlier, we're meshing the identity with the work, now I am a sitting duck because all someone has to do is come in and feed me what I want, which for a creator is going to be, your work is amazing. It speaks to me. We're craving connection. So if you offer me connection, I'm going to follow you around. And that's a really big principle in resistance and infiltration. How do I control your behavior? I give you what you want. Or at least I give you a facsimile of what you want. And I make myself the source of more. That's why I say if someone wants to protect themselves from scams, they need to become emotionally healthy, where they can separate my value as a human continues, it is fixed, it does not change. Even if both my hands are cut off tomorrow and I can never write another word, or I just stop writing, or no one likes my stuff, or whatever. And when you can separate those, now, if you've separated it, me coming in as a scammer and saying, oh, you're the best writer ever, I can totally make you a star, that's not going to resonate with you anymore because you've unhitched that compulsion wagon. And so now, instead of feeling drawn to it like some kind of little minion, oh, now you can sit back and go, wait a minute, this doesn't even make sense. And you can be realistic about how you change your practice, about how you go about finding these people or how they find you.
And that whole likability thing, I really want to get your insight. So I think it was last week or the week before, there was a cancellation mob on a young author. And she had the nerve to notice that agents were saying, I'm especially interested in non-white authors or straight stories. And they went after her, and she's young and she's ideologically aligned with them. And so she felt like her life was over. And I wrote an article about it, which basically was like, tell these losers to piss off. And it just didn't even occur to me. It's like, why would you care what they say? But she cared very much. And even though she came back to Twitter after my article, it went wide. And what I noticed was that the people who were angry, they were so angry, performatively angry at what she said, they didn't have a single thing to say to me, oddly enough. They took some screenshots and talked to each other, but not one of them had the audacity to be in my comments, but they still kept coming after her. Even she tried to explain, no, I'm not transphobic. I have a trans relative. No, I'm not homophobic. I have.
Now you got to put up your social cred.
They got to put up and of course they didn't care. And we tried to explain, no, they don't care, baby. They don't care. But she kept going because she wanted acceptance by them. Now I don't want to say unreasonable, but I'm less amenable than perhaps most women are. Women are more agreeable as a stereotype. I'm less agreeable than most women, but I'd still say more agreeable than most men. But even still, I don't put up with crap. Is that the best way to go on the internet if you are trying to set up a parallel economy? Where is that line between fuck every one of you, keep your stupid opinions to yourself, or you are my customer base and I bow to you? Like, where, if you're going to be setting up something independent with like-minded people, can you go too far into being disagreeable? We all know you can go too far in being agreeable. So what does that look like if you are in active resistance, but you're still participating in capitalism? So you need buyers and you need supporters. So where would you say that line is in your own behavior?
I don't ever believe in kowtowing to the cancel mob, ever. So if they were to come after me, for instance, you're this or you're that, I, okay, you don't put food on my table, obviously, right? Because you're never going to buy my stuff. You're never going to be interested in my take on anything. Literally, you just said that. So why should I care what you have to say? It's not for you. And something that I learned, so I'm a watercolorist, and during the summer, I sell my paintings at the farmer's market, right? And it's something that I had to learn very quickly because, again, identity, value, all of that. So when people would come in my booth and they'd look at my paintings and then they would leave, or worse yet, one time somebody came in and she goes, "How old are you?" And at the time, I think I was 47. I told her, she goes, "I thought you'd be better by now." And the beauty of it was this woman was obviously a lot older than I was. And so without thinking, I replied, "You're older. I thought you'd be nicer." And she laughed in a huff. And I immediately felt guilt. This is not how you act to people. I was raised better than this. Someone else I told a few weeks ago, they had been sitting in my booth forever and they weren't buying anything. Finally, I said, "It's not a museum." Now, that's horrible, but it illustrates something where if they didn't like it, it wasn't for them anyway. So I don't have to care about what they think of it. So in her case, this author who it's always, I think funny is probably the wrong word. I need to find a better word, but it is funny. They're always surprised when their own machine eats them. They're always surprised when the lion looks around and you're the only sheep left and it goes, "Oh, you're lunch now. You guys, you don't understand. I wear the right clothes. I say the right things. I have the right opinions. Why are you coming after me?" Because that's not the price of admission. That's not what actually gets you their approval, because there is no such thing as their. It's fleeting. It's not even real. So to answer your question more directly, the answer is always, I don't care. And if you go to my Twitter, for instance, I think I posted maybe 5 times in the last, I don't even care. I take in the content, but I don't feel the need to put out the content because the people who actually want to read me know how to find me. And that's been done through word of mouth, through Substack, through Gumroad, or other places that you can rub shoulders with people. And so part of it is your intent to get rich tomorrow, or is your intent to touch people with your work, whatever that looks like in your space and your arena.
Now, for those who feel just captured by a system they hate, now whether that's Amazon or if they're in a trad pub contract or even their day job, what is the first step towards meaningful independence, towards resisting the system that they feel captured by?
Again, I have to go back to heal your stuff so that you stop having emotional compulsion tied into the process. Because if you've ever looked at a set of choices and you've said to yourself, "Okay, this choice is the right one, but I feel like I have to do this," that's compulsion, right? That's the trauma or the emotional background or the attachment or whatever it is you got going on, because everybody's got a thing. Fix that. And now you're going to make better choices. So also vetting, learn how to vet people. That goes into the scamming thing. It goes into the, just because somebody comes to you from a big name publisher doesn't mean you want to work with them. They may be the shadiest person imaginable, And you're going to feel yourself compelled to work with them or chase their approval or all the things that go in with that, or sign off on them changing your characters or rewriting your book or whatever it is, selling out, whatever that is, because you didn't vet them. And you have to be able to walk away from anything, any person, any situation, if you recognize that it is not in your best interest. Even if it comes with a fat advance, if you came to them from a big five publisher and said, here, we're going to give you $100,000 and you're currently living in a trailer in Florida or a tiny little house in Ohio, you're going to take it. But you will tell me why that's not you selling out. So really, that's why I say, who decides what a sellout is? You're making the choices you need to make for your career. But if you want to stay, quote unquote, independent, or you want to abide by your moral code, you have to be able to walk away and you have to be able to vet people based on something other than how they make you feel. Because whether we like it or not, that is the standard that we use to trust people. They make me feel good, therefore they're trustworthy. That's how come we all have psycho exes. Because they made us feel good in the beginning. That's how you get sucked in. So that's how you do that.
I love it that no, all of my exes are just very well balanced. Nobody says that.
I'm someone's psycho ex, I promise you. So it's okay. Like it all evens out.
So now for the last question, I want to ask you to break out your crystal ball. So we're in the near future and the indie movement has risen quite a bit, that all of the most buzzy books are written by indies, that the big five still exist and they're still getting the reality TV stars and they're pumping out their slop books or whatever. But the indie movement is really on the rise. If you had to predict, what would the establishment's counter move be? Because they want to maintain their liver spotted claw death grip on all publishing.
I think they're going to keep doing what they're doing, but specifically, they're always going to appeal to the lowest common denominator. And it doesn't matter, for instance, we don't watch reality TV because we love the characters. We watch them because they're a train wreck. Go back to, I don't know how old you are, but back when I was in high school and college, Jersey Shore was a thing.
Yeah.
And I actually just rewatched that as a kind of a research study, so to speak. Okay, why was this popular? What is it that appealed to people? Why am I fascinated? This is not how I would act in common society, but I want to see what makes it acceptable. And the numbers don't lie in terms of popularity. That show was incredibly popular. It's still popular. Go look at the follower counts of the star's Instagram. Now, today, 15, 20 years later. So that's all the big five has to keep doing. But that is, again, why you have to stop playing. If you don't like the rules, change the game. Stop caring about what they're catering to, because those people are not who you're looking for. You're looking for the people that are smart enough to understand why you use this phrase at this point in this time, why this character is conflicted, to recognize the layers that you've put into your book or your plot or what have you. And write for those people. Is it going to be less? Absolutely. But we all tend to find each other. And I can't even describe how many thousands of times I have recommended a fiction book or nonfiction book to somebody, constantly trading books. There's a little circle of friends that I have, and we're constantly swapping books back and forth. And I've been able to read and experience material I never would have known about otherwise. If you're an author who says, I really want the $100,000 that I could have gotten from this group or that group or this publisher, I don't really care about you and your 5 friends. Then you're not my kind of author. So decide that. Heal your stuff. Decide what kind of author you're actually going to be, and decide who it is you're actually writing for. The rest of it, I think, comes as a result of it.
Absolutely perfect. Now, if people want to read your work, where can they find you? Where is the best place for them to go?
shepherdscale.substack.com.
Awesome. And yes, and I read several of your articles, recommend it absolutely wonderful.
Nice.
It's so
That's
much
awesome.
to think about. I loved it.
That's awesome.
Oh, thank you so much for doing this. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this.